This conference will now be recorded.
The Clatsup County Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, November 9th, 2021 will come to order. Would staff please take the roll?
Okay. Christopher Farrar,
Present.
John Orr,
Present.
Lam Quang. I see you. Carrie Johnson.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay. Nadia Gardner.
Present.
Clancy Adams, I'm here. Gail Henriksen.
Here.
And Julia Decker.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd really like to welcome the public. The Planning Commission is the official venue for public involvement in planning and community development for Clatsop County. We thank you for your interest and involvement and welcome your thoughts via email or verbal public comments later today. We'll move on now to the agenda. Thanks. Agenda is right up in front of us here, at least part of it. Unless we have proposed amendments to the agenda from staff or commissioners, we can go ahead and make a motion to adopt it.
I'll move to adopt it.
Commissioner Orr moves, and who seconds?
Chris Farrar.
Commissioner
Second.
Farrar second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we'll do the business from the public. This is an opportunity for anyone to give a brief presentation about land use planning issues or county concerns that are not on the agenda today. All speakers from the floor are to state their name and address before speaking. If you're appearing in a representative capacity, please identify who you're representing. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak today?
Yes, Charles Dice had requested to speak.
Thank you. Charles, did you wish to speak now or during later in the agenda?
So what I have to say has to do with the public hearing for the comprehensive plan goal 5. So I'm happy to do either way at your discretion, now or later.
I think we can hold off until during that hearing so people can keep in mind what you have to say on that particular item, if that's okay with you.
Sure, fine.
Great. Anyone else
Anita,
like? Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, and Anita Dodson had also requested to speak.
Anita Dodson. Go ahead.
I'm here.
Sorry, it was Pamela Matson McDonald wanted to speak. Director Henriksen, is that right?
No, I had spoken with Anita Dodson yesterday, and she said that she would be addressing the Planning Commission today.
Is Ms. Dodson present today?
I am
Yes,
here, but I didn't say I was going to be addressing the Planning Commission. I wanted to listen to see what was going on.
Okay, well, welcome. Listen in, and this is your opportunity to talk now generally, or we'll have 2 hearings later in the meeting as well, and there's opportunity for public comment at that time as we welcome comments and questions. Hearing nobody else, we can move on.
Actually, Pamela Matson McDonald will like to make a short comment.
Sure, thank you.
I'm Pamela Matson McDonald. I live on Commercial Street in Astoria, Oregon. And I just want to thank you so much for all of the information in your document today that supports wetlands and also clean watersheds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol Magnuson-Goyle, I'd like to make sure that there will be a chance for public comment about the roads issues.
Yes, there will be a public hearing under that agenda item.
And that's at this meeting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on. We will adopt the minutes. So for the minutes of the October 12th, 2021 regular meeting minutes, does anyone have any corrections or comments on those minutes? Hearing none, the minutes can be approved as presented by consensus. It does look like everyone was present at that meeting. All right, so now we'll move on to our first public hearing of the day. I do apologize to the public. Sometimes the numbers and acronyms can get a little overwhelming. So we are moving on to it's a legislative hearing regarding the proposed revisions to section 1.0500, 2.9000, and 3.9500 to 3.9800. And those are sections of the Land and Water Development Use Code, otherwise known as LAWDUC, and that's focused on subdivision and partition regulations, as well as county road standards. Will staff please make their report?
Yes, thank you. For the record, my name is Gail Henriksen, Community Development Director. Planning staff has been working with the Public Works Department since 2018 on revisions to how we process subdivision and partition applications. And as part of that review, the County Public Works Department is also recommending revisions to how roads are constructed when new subdivisions or partitions are installed on the land. The changes were reviewed on April 13th before the Planning Commission, and again on November 3rd with the Board of Commissioners. The primary scope of the changes are related to updating references in the citations for the Oregon Revised Statutes, or ORS. It's also to update old methodologies and practices and materials that are no longer used, such as silver halide, and also to update our internal code citations and terminology, because we did go through this coordination process about a year ago where we combined our development standards and our zoning codes. Some of the other revisions are intended to codify the things that we actually do in practice but are not actually spelled out in the code. And the reason for that is to provide increased clarity and transparency and to make it easier for people to understand what to expect when they come forward to partition or subdivide their property. In regard to the proposed road changes, and that was a reason that we sent a mailer out to everyone in unincorporated Clatsup County, even though they may not be partitioning or be able to partition or subdivide their land. We did send the notice out to about 7,000 households within the county. And those changes are related to the road standards that are in Table 3.2. And as part of that, in some instances, the road standards will require a larger road, a wider road to be built. In other cases, the road size will actually decrease. And I wanted to pull up Table 3.2 just so we can note those changes. Right now, the county road standards require a 24-foot width for a local road. That would be reduced down to that would stay the same. On the minor collector roads, those would increase from 22 feet to 28 feet in width. Same thing with a major collector road, 22 to 28 feet. For an arterial road, which is a very large road, be something akin to Lewis and Clark Road, where it handles a high volume of traffic, that road width would be required to increase from 24 feet to 38 feet. And so these are roads that are being built by private developers as they come in to subdivide or partition their property. So these are not new roads that the county is proposing to build. These are not being changed because of a specific project or subdivision that's been proposed. But these are intended to bring the road standards up to best modern practices as reviewed and determined by the county engineer. So I'll pause there right now. Are there any questions about table 3.2?
I have a question about the definitions of some of those roads. I mean, a new subdivision or partition, what type of road would those typically have? I mean, some of those standards refer to much larger roads that wouldn't necessarily be a part of a development, but it'd be just new county roads that would be being built. But could you explain those a little bit?
Right. So the majority of the roads that we see in a partition, let me start with a partition, are going to be local roads, and that travel width is not proposed for change. As you move on, and we can go down here, and this will give a better idea. So if you're doing a standard partition, which is where you're dividing your property into anywhere from 1 to 3 parcels, that road standard down here will stay the same, 14-foot travel width. If you are doing a serial partition where over a number of years you're coming in to partition your property 3 parcels at a time the first year, 3 more the next year, 3 more the year after that, and so on, in order to avoid the subdivision process, those roads widths will be going up, and they will go from 18 feet to 20 foot in width. And the reason for that is they are going to be serving more parcels. So what we have seen in the past is, in order for people to avoid having to build anything more than a 14-foot wide road, even though it may be serving 6 or 9 or 10 parcels over the course of several years, people have been just coming in and saying, well, I'm only doing 3 lots and I should only have to build a 14-foot wide road. But it's not looking at the cumulative impacts of what is actually being served by that road. So those standards would increase by 2 feet in width. And those are really the majority of the roads that we see constructed when we talk about a partition. When you talk about a subdivision, which is up to 30 lots at one time that's being subdivided, those road standards will stay at 20 feet. But if for some reason we had to go beyond a local road, if for some reason those volumes were greater, or as Commissioner Johnson pointed out, the county itself was building one of these roads, these would be the new standards that we would have to adhere to due to the higher volumes of traffic that these roads carry. Did that address your question, sir?
Yes, that did. So what would happen in a situation where someone was doing a partition and their road was only designed for 3 lots, and then 10 years down the road they came along and wanted to partition the next section, or even 20 years down the road? Would they then be required to widen the road that 2 feet to supply those next 3 lots, or however many they're going to be adding?
Yeah, so the new section of the road will clearly have to meet the new standards. So if your road is here for the first 3 lots and then you are building an extension, that extension would be required to meet the new standards. When we have cases like this, we do discuss with the property owner, and we look to see if there are areas where improvements can be made to bring an existing road closer or up to the current code. Sometimes if it's a really old road that's been there for decades, there may not be the easement width anymore to be able to widen the road. There may not be travel lane available to widen the road. There may be buildings now that have been built up to that roadway easement. And so that existing road portion is handled usually on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you. So one more question on the max percentage of the road grade. We have it at 12%. That looks like that's unchanged. Is there exceptions to that, or how are those road grades handled?
That would be a determination made by our county engineer. And I don't know enough engineering knowledge to say how he would make that decision. So.
Okay.
I think we could have like a lot of discussion right now, I want to just point out that we have our public in the room, and the next thing is public testimony. So let's try to just ask for some clarifications here, and then just know that we have opportunity for more in-depth conversations and discussion after. But one thing I wanted to ask was around the design speed. So that's the speed that size and that grade was designed for, but does that actually set the miles per hour the speed limit on that road, or is that a separate process?
Yeah, setting the speed limit would be a separate process, but these are, in theory, what the roads would be designed to handle.
So the lowest speed limit we'd have on these local roads would be 35 miles per hour, which is significantly higher than what rural residential or cities tend to have. Correct?
Again, that's a design speed. So that is not the posted speed limit. That's the design speed that the road is capable of handling in theory.
Hopefully just when they're speeding. So, okay, any other clarification questions on this before staff moves on and we get to public testimony?
Well, just quickly related to your question about design speed, what entity or person decides in the end what the speed limit will be on a revised road or a new road?
I don't know that I have that information. Unfortunately, our county engineer is not able to attend today's meeting. I know that there are usually standards that are set through our county code that will sometimes state what posted speed limits will be on certain road types. I know that when people request a speed study to see if the speed limit should be lowered on their road, that then traffic counts are done, and they look at the average speed versus posted speed, and we'll make decisions from that. But I don't have much more specific information than that at this point, and I'm sorry, I'm not the county engineer, so I don't have that information readily available.
Thank you, that was plenty.
One more thing for me is the on the road grade, is that something that is unchanged? That's always been in this. There's always been a table with that road grade in there, and that remains unchanged.
Yes, that's correct. The only changes are the ones that are highlighted in yellow and strike through and underline.
Okay, that's it for me. Thanks.
Did you have additional comments on the staff report, Director Henriksen? Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry. On November 4th, the planning staff did receive additional changes from Public Works staff, and I did send those out to you on November 6th with a detailed list of what was being changed or requested to be changed. You'll see that the majority of them relate to changing the term county engineer or public works director and county engineer to include a designee as well. They also wanted us to revise the diagram that shows the clear vision area. Our current diagram requires a 30-foot clear area on corner lots, and the standard actually used by Public Works is a 20 by 20 clear vision area, so we have made that change as well. And then there were some changes to the road sections, the drawings themselves, most notably on G14, which provides note number 4 on that standard. And I do see that Ted McLean, our Public Works Director, has arrived now. So if we can maybe go back, if people still have questions about some of the technical information on that table 3.2, Ted should be able to address those as well. That concludes my report, and I'm here to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you. I guess let's move on to public testimony, and then we can invite Director McLean to come and answer those initial questions and any other ones we have, if that's okay with the commissioners. All right, well, let's go ahead to public testimony. This hearing is now open for public testimony. All speakers are on the floor are to state their name and address before speaking. If you're appearing in a representative manner, please identify who you represent. Limit remarks to a reasonable amount of time in order to permit all present an equal opportunity to speak. Does anyone wish to speak today? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Cheryl Magnuson Boyle, and I'm representing myself, my husband, and I'm also representing some of the interests of the Owl family, the Ninth Cave family, who owns the property to the west of us. We share an easement that goes through our properties, and looking through the table of G2 and reading through the listing, the private road that is our easement in no way can meet any of the private road easement standards without impacting the ravine that is to the south of the private road. It cannot become a 14-foot right-of-way. We cannot have any turnouts in it, and it cannot meet the grade standard. And putting the right sort of surface on it would be an issue as well in one of the major environmentally sensitive parts of it. So we discussed this morning with the Ninth Cave representative, and we're starting. I didn't see anything in the statute as it was written up about vacation of a private easement, but this is something that we're starting to discuss between the impacted properties for our particular road. Is there anything that would help us with vacating this particular easement through our properties? Because it's no good way to make it meet the criteria.
Thank you for your comment and question. Could you just repeat for the record your name, address, name and address, and where that property is located?
My name is Cheryl Magnuson Boyle. I'm at 79414 Ray Brown Road, and the property is in Cove Beach, and this is a private easement that connects Ray Brown Road to Clatsup Loop, and was sort of an undocumented road that goes down and just kind of completed a loop that was kind of used by a bunch of people. When we bought our property, it was just two little muddy ruts going along the hillside. And it turns out that and the other issue is it's got a utilities buried underneath it. And I noticed that utility easements have to be 15 feet. And there's no utility easement for the utilities that run through our property. And I guess that's another issue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Boyle, for all those details. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move on to if we have any other public testimony, and then we'll close that and see if the commissioners want to have discussion on these issues. And I also encourage you to talk with staff about those issues as well. Yes, Director Henriksen, did you want to comment?
Yes, I would just want to clarify, Ms. Magnuson Boyle, unless you're going to be partitioning your land or subdividing it further, these road standards do not apply to you. These are only for people who are coming in once this ordinance is adopted to partition or subdivide their land. And the county would not handle the utility easements. That would be something that you would need to work with the water district on to work with them if they want to obtain easements for the lines that run underneath your property.
Thank you, Director Henriksen. Do we have other members of the public who'd like to make comment today on this particular issue? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close public testimony, and discussion is open for Planning Commissioner members. Any additional questions for Director Henriksen or comments on the staff report, document, or public comment?
Well, I'll just say that this is Commissioner Farrar. I'll just say that with respect to Ms. Boyle's concerns about her property, it sounds like that all would best be resolved meeting with county staff on working out what the best approach is there, or to get the most complete information from them. I don't think there's a need for us in this meeting to try to resolve that, because it's kind of unusual.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I came in with a question beyond the speed. Oh, at this point, I would love to hear actually from Director Ted McLean about speed limits. So we understand that these are road standards, and that the roads are built to handle certain levels of certain speed levels, but we're wondering how speed limits are actually set. I had noted that the local, the smallest, has a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, which is 15 or 10 miles per hour higher than most, like, kind of rural residential or city local roads. Are you able to speak, Director McLean?
Hi, this is Dean Karen, the county engineer. Ted's right behind me.
Okay.
Yeah, so speed limits are normally set by the state. For this particular table, the design speed is just for the roadway design. It's not actually the speed limit for those roadways. So the higher speeds would result in a more conservative design on those roads.
Thank you. So the state would determine what the speed limits would be on these roads?
Yes.
And I had an additional question around maintenance agreements. It seems a pretty substantial change to me that on page 18 or 86 rather of, let's see, so that would be the original packet, I think. They're talking about maintenance agreements on public roads, and it's section 18. Let me get to it. So sorry, page 86, yeah. So I think, as most of us commissioners know, but the public may not know, we have three kinds of roads in Clatsup County. We have county roads that the county maintains. Then we have public roads that anybody can drive on, but usually are not maintained by the county. And then we have private roads, which can be closed to the public, I understand, tell me if I'm wrong, and then are not maintained by the county either. So in this case, the county shall require that a maintenance agreement be recorded on the records, and that the people who are served by the road primarily pay for anything regarding that road. And I'm wondering if that is typical of counties and cities in Clatsop County, that public roads, which are open to the public, be maintained by people who live on them and not, and then what happens like in some cases when public roads are upgraded over time to county roads?
Yeah, this is Ted. So public roads, it is throughout Oregon, and this is probably all the states, but it's always a difficulty in how to manage those roads for the people that live on them, because these roads haven't been adopted or brought into the county road system for maintenance by the board. So that's how it has to take place. Otherwise, those people are responsible, that live on those roads are responsible for the maintenance. We do try to help in some of those areas with the maintenance of those roads. We do have a portion of funds that can be used for pothole patching and brush clearing, brush cutting. And so we can help in that way. We can help on public roads with grading roads, although we don't have enough money in the fund to be able to support grading. So we that would have to be paid for by the residences on those public roads. But depending on the road, it's a pretty minimal cost. And so it's a good resource for the county or for the residents there to call on the county to help with grading public roads. But the issue with public roads is primarily that they haven't been brought into the county road system. Now, there is a process to where they can be brought into the county road system through an LID, or there's also what's called a maintenance LID. But the LID then would be, you would assess all the people. First off, there has to be a certain percentage of the people, and I think it's 60%, have to be in favor of the road improvement. And then our county engineer then figures out what the cost would be and the engineering involved with bringing the road up to a county standard. And then all the property owners then are assessed, and then the road work takes place. And then it's up to the board at that point to accept that road into the county road system. It still has to go to the board for their acceptance of that road, which it's kind of logical that if we've gone to the board to ask for this and the people there are being assessed, that they would take it into the system. But that's the process for an LID. And then there's a maintenance LID also that can be for a one-time go through with maintenance and then everyone is assessed. Or it can be for continual maintenance of those roads. And again, then everyone would be assessed yearly for those costs. So those are the kind of the ways that different methods that we can use to help with public roads. And private roads, of course, are fully maintained and the costs associated with that by the people that live on it.
Thank you for answering that question. For staff, I just want to note there's a typo, 18.3. Instead of saying by Public Works, it's just a B.
Yes, and I believe that we corrected that on the revised document we sent out on November 6th. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Any other questions or comments before I hope we can move on to a motion? Hearing none. So it looks like we are looking for a motion. It might sound something like this. I move to recommend that the Board of Commissioners approve revisions to sections 1.0500, 2.900, and 3.9500 to 3.9800 law duck. And I think we add as amended by, help me out here, staff, the November 6, 2021 memo. Would that work?
Correct.
Or
No, that would be perfectly acceptable. Thank you.
I'm looking for a motion. Anyone willing to do it? It can't be me. Or if anyone would like to propose amendments to the, well, let's go ahead with this first. If not this, then we can.
I would make the motion, but I didn't memorize the exact language that was recounted by Chair Gardner. If it would be permissible, and if everybody understood the way she articulated that lengthy proposed motion, I would so propose.
I'll take that as a motion. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Oh,
Carrie Johnson, second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Kwong, did you have something to say or were you just responding?
No, that was an aye.
Okay. All those opposed say nay. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and thanks especially for Public Works staff fitting us in your busy schedule. I believe, okay, so the hearing is now closed. I believe these recommendations will now be forwarded to the Board of Commission for their final decision. Staff, will you please describe the next steps?
Yes, the ordinance will go to a first hearing before the board on December 8th at 6 p.m. And then second reading of the ordinance will occur on January 12th at 6 p.m. Both of those are public hearings and the public will be able to give testimony at both of those hearings.
Thank you very much. I want to note that we did get a comment in the chat from Ms. Boyle, and so I encourage you to go ahead and talk with Director Henriksen and her staff about your particular situation there in Falcon Cove Beach. I hear ya. We'll move on to our second hearing of the day. Revisions to Clatsup County's Comprehensive Plan, Goal 5. Again, this is a legislative hearing regarding the Clatsup County Comprehensive Plan Update, Goal 5. Will staff please make the report?
Thank you. This item went before the Joint Planning Commission and Countywide Community Citizen Advisory Committee back on October 26th. We as staff made revisions to the document that I believe were highlighted in draft 2, which is in your agenda package today, denoting areas where we had added additional information or corrections or deletions. Subsequent to the publishing of the Planning Commission agenda package last evening, we received comments from Amanda Punton at Department of Land Conservation and Development, or DLCD, and staff did not have a chance to fully read those comments this morning. But as part of our discussion today, I know that we are on schedule to make a recommendation to the board today. However, based on the comments that we've received back from Department of Land Conservation and Development, we feel that it would warrant from additional revisions. And so we would like to recommend that we review draft 2 and any of the comments that we received from the public or any comments from Department of Land Conservation and Development at this meeting. And then staff would go back and incorporate those additional revisions, bring this back to the Joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the Citizen Advisory Committee at their December meeting, and then bring that final draft document back to the Planning Commission again in January for a formal recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. I don't know how much detail you would like me to go through in terms of changes or revisions that we've made. I can go through those, or we can talk about any questions or comments that you may have on the document itself.
I have just a question around process. So if this is going back to the countywide CAC and then back to us again, is it going to be in addition to the other sections that we were supposed to be? So is it doubling up our work on those, or can we push back those goals a month so that we're not doing both? I'm just cognizant of our all-day meetings we've been doing for the countywide CAC PC.
Yeah, it would be in addition to the work that we would already have scheduled. As you recall, the board has approved a very structured time frame that we have to complete this process. And so we don't have a lot of wiggle room put in to begin delaying meetings. It means we would have to double up on work. Alternatively, you can disregard the staff recommendation that we handle it the way that I've just proposed, and you can just move forward and incorporate any recommendations for amendments that you have today, and then staff would just move those forward and we would just continue on our process.
What would happen if we became behind on this very tight timeline? I mean, is it possible that we can slow it down a little bit so that we are more reasonably supporting our volunteers and their time constraints in such circumstances?
We would have to go back to the board with a revised schedule, and I cannot speak for how the board would review that.
Any more questions or comments for staff around that process part? Do you think we should go forward today with, I think we should do some discussion today for sure and accept public testimony on this issue. But do you think that we should be going ahead and moving things forward in this meeting, or do you think we should follow staff recommendation on bringing it back through the process a second time? Commissioner Huang. Oh, I'm sorry, was that Commissioner Farrar? Commissioner Farrar.
Thank you. Just a general comment.
Here we go.
In looking over the packet this morning and reviewing a lot of the documents that are offered as references to what we're trying to do here, it seems to me clear that this process is better taken up in a methodical and slow fashion, and that the real goal should be that we do the job right, that we're happy with the end product, that the document, the comprehensive plan, can stand for 5 or 10 years without being seen as flawed. By rushing ahead and making it schedule driven, I don't think we're going to wind up with a product that is something that this county can be proud of. And I don't know who could go to the Board of Commissioners and plead a case for slowing the process back down just a little bit, not to the extent that we had in the past where it was taking way too long. Now we've done the opposite and we're speeding ahead with the sole goal of just having it done on a certain date. I'd rather leave the actual date that we get this project done flexible so that we can wind up with a good comprehensive plan revision. As I looked over the documents today and then realized that we finally got some significant comments from the Department of Land Conservation and Development that I haven't even had a chance to look at. I think it's very important today that we accept the idea of coming back to this and not make a final decision on this draft 2 of Goal 5. But certainly some conversation around some of the significant points would be appropriate. And I'm sorry to blab on like this, but I'm for slowing things down. Let's do it methodically. And I think the Board of Commissioners would be reasonable on that. They must want a good product that will serve the county for the very important role that a comprehensive plan plays. So I'll leave it to somebody else to add.
Well,
This is Commissioner Rohr. I'd like to be heard.
I think
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Orr, please go ahead.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Farrar's comments and suggestion that we take the necessary time to do this right. I have tried to get through Amy.
yeah, this is Commissioner Kwong here.
Everybody hear me?
Agree with
Commissioner Kwong, could you just wait one moment for Commissioner Orr to finish? Thank you. Go ahead.
Did everybody hear what I said before I got interrupted?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. And so with that in mind, I will tell my fellow commissioners that I have attempted to get through the very hard and diligent and competent, thorough work done by Amy Putin, the author of the comments or corrections on the Goal 5 comprehensive plan component or piece, and I'm very impressed with it. I didn't see anything I disagreed with. It seemed well thought out, but everybody should have to read it. It's very long. A lot of work went into it, so I can't conceive that there would be any grave consequence or penalties to the county in postponing for 1 month the further review of it. I also appreciated the contribution of Don Abing on the history of Native Americans and the Chinook Indian Nation in the historical aspect or legacy for Clatsop County. Really appreciate it. Couldn't get through it. Really wanted to, but I was, there's just so much time, and I think the process does owe the volunteers, some of whom are still working, such as yours truly, to give them the time to properly review the documents so that the input and labors and wisdom really of others is respected. So again, I'm sorry for being long-winded. So this could be in the form of a motion to table until the next meeting, further decision-making on the Goal 5 question.
Just a clarification, Director Henriksen. So if we decide that to follow the staff recommendation to send this back, can we still take public testimony and have this discussion and have it influence the next draft?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why you couldn't collect public input.
Okay, so we would just do it we could close the public hearing and just take it in a more informal way.
Yeah, as a discussion.
Yeah, sure. Commissioner Kwong, I know you wanted to speak.
Well, I think I agree with Commissioner Ferrara and Commissioner Orr. It's quite of a burden for those of us who work to continue the process, but it's a very important process that we need to get it right. So yeah, I do agree to continue working on this.
Thank you. So I think then at this point we could go ahead and take a motion to delay the public hearing until, or to continue the public hearing until the next meeting. Is that how it would work, Commissioner, Director Henriksen? And then we can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, if you want to continue it just to your next planning commission, which would be the second Tuesday in December, which would be the 14th of December.
Okay. So,
I believe I already made that motion.
yeah, so I was just looking for like kind of the specific process here. So I think Commissioner Orr was making a motion to continue this hearing until the December 14th, 2021 meeting. Do we have
I'll
a second?
second that motion. I second.
Okay. Commissioner Farrar, second. Any discussion?
Can I just ask for clarification, please? Does that include bringing it back then to the Joint Planning Commission, or do you just want to continue the public hearing and we can just give an update to the joint meeting of where we are in the process of Goal 5 review?
I think that includes going back to, that just gives the time to go back to bring the document back to the countywide.
Okay, so if you continue to December, that means you will be reviewing this at your November meeting because your December countywide will occur after your December Planning Commission meeting. So we would be doing that on the 23rd, which we can do. It's a very tight turnaround for staff to incorporate comments, but we can do that and our agenda would have to go out next Tuesday.
I need clarification. Would there be time for the Planning Commission to meet and discuss and incorporate public comment from the CACs before the Planning Commission met again? It sounds like there would not be time for that. Point of clarification, please.
You could do that at your joint meeting with the countywide CAC on November 23rd. We can incorporate anything that you give us today, but our agenda has to go out next Tuesday. So there's a limited time for staff to make and incorporate those revisions, which was why we had recommended bringing it to the joint meeting in December and then bringing it back to the Planning Commission in January. But we can meet that deadline. I just need to know which way the commission is wants their motion to be made so that I understand what staff has to do.
Apologies for the confusion. I think we would like to, is that okay? Commissioner Orr, you're the one who made the motion, but it doesn't make sense to follow the staff recommendation on timing.
Yeah, and I would accept a friendly amendment to the motion to facilitate my intention, which is to make sure that the Planning Commission hears from the CACs before making a final vote on adoption of the amendments to Goal 5.
So that date is January. What's that meeting date there, Director Henriksen?
That's going to be, the Planning Commission would be January 11th, and the joint meeting with the CAC would be December 28th.
All right, so let's see. We need someone to.
I want to amend the motion made by Commissioner Orr and seconded by Farrar to accept the timeline that staff has recommended, that we take up the issue at the joint meeting of the Planning Commission and countywide CAC at the 28th of December meeting, and that then we finalize our comments and recommendations to the board at the Planning Commission's regular monthly meeting, January 11th, 2022.
Thank you. Great, Commissioner Farrar. Do we have a second for that amendment? Commissioner Kwong, seconds.
Yeah, yes.
Any discussion? So we'll take a vote on that amended motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those
Aye.
opposed, all those opposed say nay. That motion, the amended motion passes unanimously. And in my watching of the expert here, Andy Davis, and sharing the CAC, I think we also have to then vote on the original amendment that's now amended, correct? So all those in favor of that amended motion, say aye.
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 And all those opposed, say nay. Sorry, I'm roughing it through the amended motion process here. It sounds like that is unanimous. So we're going to move that along to the not next meeting, but the meeting after that. So that gives opportunity not only to incorporate Amanda Putin's suggestions, but also for the countywide CAC and Planning Commission to think more deeply about the wetlands workshop that was held yesterday, and especially Naranyan and Nancy's wisdom. But we could talk about that a little bit today. I'd like to just take, though, I know we have at least one person in the room who wanted to give public testimony. So let's go ahead and allow those comments now in a more informal way. And then we can have a little discussion that'll kind of get our intellectual juices flowing around this in anticipation of a more in-depth conversation at that next meeting. So I think Charles Dice wished to speak at this meeting.
Yes, thanks, Chair Gardner. I did want to say a few words. First, I've submitted a number of specific comments in an email dated November the 6th that I'm assuming will get entered into the record, and I won't read through those as part of my public comment. But what I would like to say is that I've been involved here in the county for about 20 years, which is about how long I've lived in Cove Beach. And during that period of time, I've volunteered in a number of positions in the county, including about 12 years on the Cannon Beach Fire Department and 10 years with the Clatsup County Sheriff's Office on their high angle rescue squad, and a number of other volunteer positions in the community. So I've had an opportunity to work with a lot of groups in the community on things like wetlands and a lot of the Goal 5 objectives. And one of the things I learned in the process is that when the original comprehensive plan was developed, for whatever the historical reasons, there wasn't any representation on the Southwest Coastal Committee from Cove Beach, and a number of resources, I think, in Cove Beach got overlooked. So as part of the current update, I've been trying to bring those back into view for the various committees, of course, the Southwest Coastal CAC, as well as the countywide CAC. And the wetlands issue is a really big issue for me, and for a lot of people down in this part of the county. And sad to say, what we've actually seen happen over the last 20 years is that the protections have gotten less rather than more for the wetlands. So 20 years ago, we had better protections for the wetlands in the Arch Cape Cove Beach area than we do today. And there's been a number of efforts exerted by both the community and some of the watershed councils to try and correct that over the years, but not much progress has been made. But one of the big things that did happen back in the 2010-2011 timeframe is that a number of organizations here in the south part of the county banded together and managed to scrape up funding for a local wetlands inventory to be done by a professional group called Pacific Habitat out of Portland. And that LWI was subsequently adopted by DSL, but unfortunately it's never been adopted by the county, which has been quite a bone of contention for those of us that were involved with this, and quite frustrating, I think, to a lot of us who volunteer a lot of time and energy, you know, to try and protect our local resources. So I'd really like to ask the Planning Commission to include in their deliberations some consideration for the county to adopt the existing LWI that has already been done, was done back in 2011, I think. And of course, as was discussed in yesterday's meeting, it would seem logical that the county should use the most recent and most accurate data that is at its disposal. And certainly that local wetland inventory is much more accurate than the national wetland inventory or the state wetland inventory prior to DSL adopting the LWI. So I think that represents the most recent data. Now, is it perfect? No, but you know, certainly property owners that want to challenge that have the opportunity to get their own delineations done, which at the end of the day is the best way to do a survey of exactly where the wetland is and how big the wetland is. And I'd also like to encourage the Planning Commission to take a look at the concept of other communities doing something similar to what we did here, and that is to, you know, if they're so excited and interested in their local wetlands, if they could fund their own study by a professional organization and get it adopted by DSL, it seems to me that that would be a good way for the county to husband their resources and their money by utilizing professional studies done by others. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dice. Do we have anyone else from the public that wanted to talk on this subject? All right, we'll just move on to a short discussion among the planning commissioners around this topic, getting us ready for the next, our next meeting, which will focus more deeply on it. So that would be not this upcoming countywide PC meeting, but the next one, end of December. Aren't a lot of us going to be on vacation? We'll see. And then back on the Planning Commission on January 11th. Any of the commissioners want to ask any questions or make any comments on the current draft, on any of the public testimony we received today, both by email and in person, or Amanda Punton's comments that you'd like staff and others to consider?
Are you talking, John?
Sounds like you, Commissioner Farrar.
Yes, it's me. Unfortunately, I missed almost the entire public testimony by Charles Dice. My computer got a glitch, I guess, and it took me a while to realize it was at my end and not yours. So I'll look at the video, which at the recording of this meeting to get that information. But I just wanted to say that there's been a lot of good information that came out of the meeting yesterday. And again, I had some difficulties with the workshop that Crest put on yesterday because I was using a new device to access the meeting electronically. And so I'd like to review a lot of those sources of information and discussion. And I'd like to hear the commissioners' views around more about wetland delineation and what the best approach to follow is. It's unclear to me what the benefits of trying to put off the realities of inventorying accurately the known wetlands we have in the county, and then deciding what kind of protection we want to extend to them, whether it's going to be safe harbor or it's going to be more of an individual approach. And around that discussion, I think it's relevant as to what the costs are of those two different methodologies to the property owner that may wish to develop right up to the edge of a wetland, or even try to get permission to fill part of a wetland and make up for that in some fashion with a wetland bank exchange. But so I'm real curious what other commissioners think. I have my own opinions on it. I think the safe harbor, even though the Board of Commissioners has
Drop out.
yeah. Can you hear me?
Now, yeah.
Now we can. You dropped out there for a minute there, Commissioner Farrar.
Well, something jumped on my screen here from Google. Anyway, I'm kind of a slow talker, and I'm sorry because I know there's a lot to go through here. But the point is, I kind of feel like Oregon has a well-established process for going through this kind of thing, and it includes who talks first, who puts their ideas out first. And to me, that's the public. It's every person that has a stake in Clatsop County gets to talk. And before the county commissioners decide one way or another in a meeting that, while it may be public, workshops don't allow for public comment, I don't think it helps the process to have them decide on an issue before the public has had a chance to state what their feelings are about this important matter for the county. And then from there, it logically would go to a citizens advisory committee, and from there to the planning commission. And then the planning commission makes recommendations to the board. And that helps the board because they know that way they really heard from everybody that's got the time and interest to comment. It's not anything about one side trying to get their way and the other side getting cheated out of it. It's about, we're supposed to try to hear from everybody in a fair way before decisions are made. And then the decisions can be made. And it may be that the Board of Commissioners decides with all that they hear that they don't want to go down the road of a safe harbor, that they want to do it individually. But I think there's a lot of people that would understand that's kind of an expensive route to go down. And there's a whole bunch of issues like that. I'm going to stop talking now, and maybe one of the other commissioners would like to chime in with their thoughts. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Farrar. I'll just piggyback on that for a minute, in that in Amanda Punton's proposed edits, one thing she talks about is the opportunity to do a combination approach of standard inventory, the standard inventory approach, or the safe harbor approach, depending on what makes sense, right? So in areas where you have like pretty intense development pressure, lots of wetlands, lots of riparian areas, and maybe funding available from a partner like a community club or a watershed council or other organization, then maybe in those areas you do the standard approach, that's more fine-tuned and expensive and takes more time. And then maybe you do the safe harbor approach in other areas, so that you can reserve resources, but also be the most efficient and effective at what you're trying to do. I thought that was a good clarification, that you don't have to choose one or the other. I was really heartened yesterday in the meeting just to hear about all the great work that's being done, because it says to me that staff is committed to better inventorying our resources so that we can protect them over time, or at least have less impact over them over time. And so once we really know where they are scientifically using the most up-to-date technology, and thanks to CREST for having all that, and also our other experts like Pacific Habitat Services and others, those are the kinds of people we should be really listening to. I think there's a lot of sometimes misinformation that's thrown around about what's accurate and what's not accurate, and what's changing and what's not. And I think, it's easy to get an idea from one situation and try to extrapolate it out to everything. And so I think if we kind of step back and we try to, just collect the good information and then methodically go with what makes sense in particular communities, because they are each different. And also the community interests are different. I think you guys hear loud and clear, Southwest Coastal is very invested in protecting our streams and wetlands. Other areas may not be as much. So maybe we, try to figure out like the areas that have the highest sensitive habitat and also the most community support, and start with kind of a low-hanging fruit situation. Knowing that my community can be a little ornery sometimes, but all coming from a good place, I think, which is caring for our local communities and natural resources. Since I have the floor, I'm going to ramble a little longer and just say how happy I was also to see that the individual water systems really given their due in this draft, that we don't just look at the groundwater and surface water districts, but we also look at the fact that a very large number of people in our unincorporated communities rely on individual systems and small group systems, and that they can be vulnerable to all different kinds of things for a variety of reasons. And I really liked how staff worded that in the document. And then all the additions around parks and natural areas and scenic views in the areas that aren't about state resources. I really appreciate all of that. And finally, around climate change, I was just thinking yesterday, Nancy's last question was the best question, I thought. And so I was like, let's talk some more on that, which was what makes us unique. We can look at all these different county Goal 5 examples, but we're not the same as everybody else. We have similarities to some and differences to a lot. And so I was thinking about, in terms of Goal 5, okay, well, like, what is one unique thing about our Goal 5 wetlands and riparian areas? And so I go, because right now I have climate change in my brain. I was thinking about saltwater intrusion. I think most counties in Oregon, there's only 3 counties on the coast, I think. We're the only places in Oregon where we're gonna have saltwater intrusion into our freshwater lakes and drinking water sources due to sea level rise. And also, if we have a tsunami, we're kind of toast that way too. As soon as you get salt water in your wells, you don't have a good well anymore. So maybe one objective that might be missing to this current draft is around just monitoring, like really understanding like what are the most vulnerable, and then paying attention to that possibility in the next 10 or 20 years, that especially in the Clatsup Plains, I think. I know from my work at the Long Beach Peninsula, I know they're on an island aquifer system as well, where you'll have actually salt water in your drinking water source sitting with your fresh water. And as salt water rises, you end up with salty water. So maybe that's one thing that makes us unique that is currently missing. So I'll bring that up in our next meeting. And then of course our vulnerability to tsunamis, but that doesn't play into goal 5 as much, but goal 16 and 17 for sure. Other questions or comments from commissioners before we move on?
Well, this is Commissioner Quam here. I'm wondering about the private study at the Cove Beach there. Is that a legitimate study, and why haven't we not look at it? Is there because they're private study versus what the public had paid for, or how did that work? I'm wondering why have we not looked at it?
Yeah, I'll ask Director Henriksen to answer that question.
So it was a study that the county did not pay for. It was privately funded, as I understand. It was approved by the Department of State Lands, I believe, in 2011, and it is available online. It's not a secret document that we're trying to hide from the public. We can also post it on the county's website as well. But if you go to the Department of State Lands, I don't have the exact link in front of me, but if you just search for local wetland inventories, you'll be able to find all of them for the state. And there are several in the county, in addition to the Falcon Cove Beach area. There's one, I believe, for Gearhart, Cannon Beach, and Warrenton as well.
So the state's adopted it, and I believe staff actually does use it. It's actually on Clatsup web maps too. So you can go on Clatsup web maps and actually turn on the wetlands layer, and you'll see LWIs. Those are all cities though. The only unincorporated area that has an LWI right now is Arch Cape and Cove Beach. But the Duncan report that we talked so much about yesterday and the updates I understand that Crests are doing is pretty darn close actually to a local wetland inventory. So it's possible that that information could be upgraded fairly easily to an LWI as well, which seems to me to make sense there. So that's another low-hanging fruit situation for the county. The question is whether the county will adopt it. If you adopt it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Henriksen, then that would require the county to then protect significant wetlands, and that is what the county has not done up to now, despite requests from community members.
Well, to date, the board has not adopted the inventory.
I see staff member.
Yes. Are you asking me to speak to the motivations of the board? That's outside my parameter. I can just tell you that the board to date has not adopted or approved the local wetland inventory, and they were asked about it back in 2017, I believe, when the Wetlands Ad Hoc Advisory Committee did make their recommendations to the board at that time, and the board did not take any action at that time on the 4 recommendations from that committee. In our discussions with the board that is currently seated, they have said that they have an interest in going back and revisiting some of those recommendations from the Wetland Advisory Committee. And I believe that Planning Commissioner member Kerry Johnson was part of that Wetland Ad Hoc Advisory Committee, and he may have some additional information to share.
I don't have anything to share at this time. I'd have to go back and review what our recommendations even were. It's been years ago now, but I would be interested in seeing what we collectively came up with to move forward out of that committee. That just never happened. So, yeah, we talked a little bit about this at our last meeting, but I don't know if the board has visited it any further.
I think I wasn't actually asking Director Henriksen about the motivation of the board. It was more about so I think there's always confusion around, does the county use it? And the answer is yes, the county uses it. But by not adopting it, the adoption part is what triggers like the protections under goal 5 and goal 16 and 17. And so that's why the county up to now has avoided doing it, in my opinion. So any other comments? I think we should move on. We're ready. Oh, I hear some noise down there.
Well, this Commissioner Farrar again, I seem to be having a lot of interruptions this morning, so I missed a lot of what Commissioner Fawn had to say, and I'm sorry about that. So I'm speaking by phone now and looking at you on my computer screen. It's very perplexing. At any rate, I have a general comment about this whole Goal 5, and it occurred to me that we often hear it stated that it's a very inclusive sort of goal that includes all kinds of different things, and therefore it's kind of hard to wrap your arms around it. But in reality, I think there's good reason why so many things were put into one goal. I think that I wasn't there, of course, when this was all done by the state legislature, but the items included in there, which are wetlands and riparian areas and historical stuff and open space and groundwater resources and aggregates and all that kind of stuff, there's a message there that we live in a big system. It's complicated. It has many different aspects to it that one influences the other. So I think it's important to keep that in mind as you take up Goal 5, to understand that it's a gigantic system and land, water, and biology all interact with one another. And what you do in one part of the goal setting of Goal 5 influences the others. And from that basic physical stuff, land and water, combined with the biological stuff, then humans enter the picture, and they see that as various resources that can be used or appreciated. And they all work in concert. It's like a symphony. You can't take out one piece and modify it without affecting the whole composition. For example, the National Flood Insurance Program mapping is often something that we're concerned around, and it interrelates directly with wetlands and with climate change, with sea levels rising. These things all interact with forests, which provide habitat for a lot of our fish, and the fish go out in the ocean. So off the coast, we've got resources out there that are affected by what we do on land. And the biologic communities assist in agriculture by making soil and retaining soil instead of having it erode into our streams. So it's a gigantic system. And Goal 5 is tricky because it includes so much, but that's the whole point, I think, that you don't take one of those pieces in isolation, and here's a chance to roll them all together. And that's what we should be thinking about as we try to word our goals and our policies. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to point out to everybody in the room that in the chat, both Ms. Decker and Director Henriksen have put links to the Arch Cape Cove Beach local wetland inventory. If anybody wants to look at that, that's like a standard protocol that you have to do in order to do a local wetland inventory using wetland scientists. And we had some discussion about this over the last couple meetings, just that there's kind of like, there's the National Wetland Inventory, then there's the State Wetland Inventory, then there's the local wetland inventory. they're all pictures of what is most likely that there are wetland resources on the landscape, but they're not exact. They're not supposed to be exact. Wetland delineations, one done within the last 5 years, is what is like the industry standard of what is actually there. So I feel like lately there has been some, comment about the LWI not being accurate enough or being too old, and that's kind of the nature of the thing. Is that and there's also a seasonality about it too. Of course, wetland inventories are based on 3 things: the presence of hydric soils, so wetland soils, the presence of wetland plants, and of course around here it's so wet, sometimes you have wetland plants where it's not always wetlands, but if you have a combination of plants, usually it indicates it's wet a good chunk of the year and the soils are very wet. And then the final thing is presence of water, but you don't have to have presence of water to be a wetland. So you need all 3 of those things in combination, and so that's what they do, is they look at all 3 of those things and they say, and they also, in the local wetland inventory, they walk the landscape the best they can with permission from landowners, so they don't get on every property. So they just do their best, and it's definitely better than the statewide or national wetland inventory, but not perfect. Okay, anything else? Let's move on, I think. All right, foundation building topics. We still have some training to do. I invite staff to present on any foundation building topics for the day.
Well, I guess that will be me. This is Joanna Lyons-Antley, the County Council. Today we're going to talk about parliamentary basics, just some procedure. I'm not going to make this too long. You all have talked today for about an hour and a half, so hopefully I can try to make this 15 minutes or less. First of all, I listened carefully to Chair Gardner today. She did a fabulous job of navigating a lot of the different issues, but we're just going to go through some of the basics, and then we can talk about things that we might need a little help on. I think motions might be something that we can talk about, but first of all, I just have to say compliment Chair Gardner on the amendment and how she handled it as 2 different motions, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So let's get started. I tried to do similar pictures so you all know it's me. Let's see, next screen. Okay, so why do we do parliamentary procedure? First of all, we want to do parliamentary procedure to make decisions, first of all, easier, right? In an orderly manner. Can people from the public follow the decisions that are being made by the governing body, by the committee, by the group that is looking at a decision and providing input? We want to ensure that the rights of the majority are protected. The majority, of course, usually are the ones that are making the motions and the seconds and making the discussion and having the discussion. But we also want to ensure the rights of the minority. Does everybody have an opportunity to be heard? Has everybody's viewpoint been made? So there's this procedure that we follow. So it's responsible, every member has a responsibility when they come to these meetings. First of all, we want to address each item one at a time. You want to extend courtesy and fairness to each member, board member, and the public who are speaking. And you all do that very well. And then you want to guarantee, like I mentioned before, the rights of the minority. Because often if you're in the majority, you could be in the minority in the next meeting. It just is, it's topic by topic. And so we all have an obligation of each member who's participating to make sure that you protect the rights of the minority. So Robert's Rules of Order, going to the next slide, is really the procedure that has been adopted. Really, it's been a parliamentary procedure that's been adopted. But I want you to understand that we don't follow Robert's Rules of Order strictly, right? So large groups, because there's so many people, there's so much discussion, really follow Robert's Rules of Order very strictly. Whereas a small group, really the idea is to have the intent of the decision being public and transparent, and so everybody can understand where we're at. The most important thing is to understand what was actually decided. For those of you who missed a meeting and you try to figure out what's been decided, you often go to the motions. You look at what was the motion, what was the second, what was the discussion. And so it's important for all of to think about it from the public's perspective. We want to know what's actually being discussed and what's been decided. So that's why we really follow a modified Robert's Rules of Order. It's not a procedurally very precise Robert's Rules of Order that we follow, but it's important to understand that it gives us the basic guidelines. So an order of a meeting generally, and you've seen this today as a good example. It may be a little bit different than what you see on the screen, and I apologize, John, or I will read it for you so you can understand really what we're talking about. Generally, the first order of business is call to order. So that's done by the chair. Usually there's a roll call. It doesn't require any motions. The second item in a meeting is approval of agenda, generally. That is the order that the agenda is in, the topics that are being discussed. This usually is a motion and a second. I say usually because, again, we're following kind of loose guidelines of Robert's Rules of Order. I will note today that Chair Gardner said, I believe it was on the agenda, that by consensus it can be adopted. And that is fine as well. There's no hard and fast rules on that. Then generally, if you all take public comment, which you as a body do, that will follow the approval of the agenda. Then there will be approval of minutes from the previous meeting. That does require a motion and a second. You do not have to be present at the previous meeting to actually vote on this item. But often people will say, I abstain because I wasn't present. That's not necessary. You can approve the minutes from the previous meeting without actually having been present. Then there will be generally reports. I think for your agenda for today, it's at actually the end of the meeting. Again, this is just a loose idea of what order they generally are. Unfinished business, that can be something that's been carried over from the last agenda, the last meeting. New business, again, something new. And then good of the order, those are usually the announcements, and then adjourn. So the items that really generally require a motion and a second are approval of the agenda, unfinished business, and new business. So if you think about today's meeting, that's really what you did. You had a motion and a second for the two public hearings that were held today. Does anybody have any questions before I move on to the next topic? Okay, seeing nothing.
Sorry, Joanna, this is Nadia here. I'll turn on my camera. I use this book right here, and I was just going back and reminding myself, but according to this Robert's Rules, both the agenda and the minutes can be adopted by consensus or unanimously without any corrections. So that's why I follow it that way. I know that was, thanks.
Thank you for that clarification. Again, we're not going to be so specific that we say, oh, it's not valid because you didn't have a motion in a second. We're not going to do that. The most important things today, obviously, were the hearings that were held, and was there a motion? Was there a second? Did you recommend approval? And I think if you just keep those kind of guidelines in mind, I think that's very helpful. And certainly, I would defer to you all on how you run your meeting. But I'm glad that Chair Gardner, you have a resource that you can look at. I think that's helpful. The next thing I would say is motions. And going to the next slide. The proper way to say it is I move to, and then it may be to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of law docs, sections, blah, blah, blah. And that's the motion. What's not proper is to say so moved. So, for example, if today I heard Chair Gardner saying, well, a motion might be this, and propose, kind of give you a motion. If somebody would have said so moved, that would not have been a proper motion. Although I understand, like I said, the general rules. Do we understand what's being done? Yes. So to help you out, I had a couple thoughts as I was looking through our materials today. It might be helpful for you as Planning Commission to put in the staff report what the proposed motion would be. You may see some of those in the agendas that go in front of the Board of Commissioners. And so as staff, I might talk over that issue with Director Henderson and see if we might put a proposed motion in there to make it a little bit easier for you. Just a thought, just an idea. Yeah, thank you. And then the next thing that's important is a second. And a second is really important because it shows that there's at least not just one person has a motion and wants to put something out there for voting on, but that there's a person who seconds it. If there is no second, it fails for lack of a second, and the chair will recognize that there is no second. But if there is a second, there can be then discussion on the topic. And then ultimately a vote. So each of the motions that we have needs to have a motion. I move to X, take an action, and then there needs to be another person who seconds it. Before I move on, is there any other kind of questions or discussions?
I have just a point I'd like a little clarification on. With regard to making a motion, I think sometimes we hesitate a little bit to make a proper motion because we're not completely clear on what the motion should include. And this morning was a perfect example with the road revisions to the code on roads. There were a number of sections cited. And so, my question, I guess, is how necessary is it to list each of the sections that are being revised in the motion, or can you just say, kind of generalize that?
So excellent question.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Excellent question. I think when you're making a recommendation to the board, as you often are, I think you can be more general about it, because really in the discussion, we as staff will understand generally what's being stated. You'll notice that staff is very good about asking, please provide me some clarification about this. And as board members, you can ask the person making the motion what their intent is as well, if you're not clear, as another person making, trying to understand what the motion is on the table. But I don't think it necessarily has to be absolutely very specific. The one, I would kind of compare that with when it goes in front of the board, right? If they're, say, for example, they're awarding a contract, okay? I move approval to award the, we'll say, rebuild of the jail facility for an amount not to exceed $7 million, and delegate authority to the county manager for any contract and amendments. I just made that motion off the top of my head, okay? That was very specific about delegating authority, a contract amount. I didn't say who the contractor was, but I should have, and for the purposes that it's made. Generally, when you're making a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners, you don't have to hit all those high points. We can understand from the direction that you all give that it's your general recommendation. What I will say, though, is when you're dealing with appeals and we're dealing with land use decisions and you're making recommendations, those will need to be more specific. And staff will help you make those more specific. So I think that's really why I kind of made the recommendation maybe at the beginning is if staff can help you perhaps draft a motion in those particular instances, that will help you a little bit. I know we're happy to do so. And that might make your jobs a little bit easier. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes, that's very good, very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so in the next slide, so when we're talking about business items, so we have an item today, and again, you all did a great job today, so I'm just reaffirming or reassuring you that you're doing it correctly. When you have the first agenda item, so say today was the road standards public hearing, the chair will ask for the staff report. Staff provides a report. When staff is done, often they'll say, I'm happy to answer any questions for you. And it is your opportunity then as board members to ask questions. You can have a little bit of discussion if you like. Sometimes the discussion is held until later. Sometimes there's more discussion at that during the staff report. And at that point, then the chair will say, okay, I'm going to open it up for public hearing, and then allow anybody who wishes to speak to speak. It's not always that we have a public hearing, but sometimes I just obviously, if it's appropriate, we have that step in there. After the discussion is held, commissioners, each of you have had an opportunity to weigh in on the item in front of you. There will often be a motion, then there'll be a second. Then if there's any outstanding discussion, you have a discussion, and then you will have a vote. Chair Gardner, you did an excellent job, again, making it through this process, but that's just generally what happens. Some folks say you can only have a discussion after there's a motion. I am not one of these people who stay strictly to those rules. I don't think that's necessary. But generally, that is the order that you progress when you're doing a motion. And are there any questions on those business items, the order that I covered? Okay. Going to the next slide. Okay, so let's talk about some miscellaneous items. Okay, quorum. You all are a group, I believe, of 7 Planning Commission members. So that requires a quorum of a majority. So that's at least 4 people to be present to hold the meeting. Chair Gardner again waited until there was 4 of you that were on the line before she started. That was the right thing to do. So the chair is really, the role is to really kind of be the referee to start the meeting, to end the meeting. When we had folks that were talking over each other, she did a great job of, okay, let's have this commissioner speak, and then we will hear from this commissioner. And then I noticed that she did a good job by having the public be able to speak to Goal 5 as well. So there were a lot of opportunities where she was able to bring folks. Okay, and I'm sorry, I got distracted by a question. So Director Henriksen asked, would a quorum of 4 still be required if there are only 5 appointed members at this time? A quorum of 4 is still required to start the meeting. It gets complicated when you're talking about budget issues, but we're not talking about budget issues. So yes, we would still have to have a quorum of 4. But I'm going to do a little bit of research on that one because it is so situational dependent, and I need to look at your bylaws and look at the state statutes. So it's a good question. I'm going to come back to you on that. I'm just going to say 4 for now, but then hold your breath. I might come back and say it could be something less. It could be 3. Which would be the majority of the 5 open positions. All right.
Luckily, our commissioners are very diligent at coming at almost every meeting.
Yes, thank you for not having me to look that up on the fly. So that I appreciate that. But I'm always here if you have that kind of question that comes up. you all can ask if that comes up. All right. Amendments to motions. Okay, now this is where I think you guys did really well today. So there was a motion on the table. You all discussed it. You had a second on the motion. You discussed it. Then there was an amendment made. So there was a motion to amend the motion, the original motion, which you all voted on. And then there was a vote on the amended motion as it was amended. And so you did excellent on that. So amendments of motions can really be tricky. And I think I see a lot of people get really confused on it, but you guys did great. So I'm not even going to spend much time on it, just to tell you you did fantastic. Point of order. Does anybody know what a point of order is? It's basically where a member of the board believes that the Roberts Rules of Procedure or the procedures that you're following are not being followed. And it will be up for the chair to make a decision whether those rules are being followed. So for example, if I say one of your rules is to be respectful to each other, which of course it is, if one of the members does not believe that another member is being respectful, they can say point of order and they can say what the issue is. And then it'll be for the chair to say, okay, let's bring it back to civility. And I recognize that point of order. And so here's what I'm going to say. Point of order is not something I typically see, but it doesn't require a second. It's just a statement by one of you all to bring it to the attention to the chair. And then the chair will make a decision on how to handle it. I only bring that up is because people like to talk about point of order. I don't think in my years of advising folks, I've only seen it brought up maybe 2 or 3 times. And I've been to literally hundreds of meetings. So not something to be too wound up about. There's a great resource here in Oregon. It's the Oregon School Board's Guide to Parliamentary Procedure. And it gets really into a lot more nitpicky details. Some folks really want to get into these details, such as when you table something, who can vote on it to remove it from the table, and things like that. I think this is a resource for you. There's a link here. I can send you all the PowerPoint after this meeting, so you can take a look at it, or it can be in the minutes, I suppose, as well for this meeting. Or you can Google it. It's a really good simplified version of parliamentary procedure for school boards. So I think that was my last slide. Yeah, that's right. So any questions that you all have for me, I'm happy to answer them best I can. I'm not perfect at this, but we managed to slog through each meeting, and I can understand what the motion is at the end of the day. That's the important thing. And I see from Commissioner Johnson that you would like an email of the PowerPoint. Happy to provide that.
Thank you, Counselor. I really appreciate that, and I'm glad I passed the test for the day. That amended motion was going to trip me up. It was a little sloppy, but I tried my best. All right. Yeah, and I just want to mention that I was glad to have received a script from Gail Hendrickson and Clancy Adams. I think when I first started, that I inherited from the previous chair, and I adapt it for each meeting. And if I need help, I've gotten great help from staff. So thank you for that. All right, let's move on to our last few items here. Project status report number 5. You can find that in page 2, I think 65 of your packet, and on the screen here. Any questions of staff on any of the projects that have passed through our doorway? And then also I noticed she added the goals so that we can keep track of where we are with approval, well, moving it forward with recommendations to final approval at the Board of Commissioners. That's a great idea. Help us keep on track. When did we see it? Where is it going? Any questions or comments on that from the planning commissioners or from staff? Okay, let's move on to good of the order. Do any planning commissioners have anything relevant to Clatsup County or the Planning Commission to report? Hearing none. Oh,
I have a question about upcoming meeting dates. If we have those all set, maybe we could go over those and look at them real quick.
sure, Director Henriksen.
Yes, we do have those dates. So we are here in November. Let's see. So our next joint meeting with the Countywide Citizen Advisory Committee is November 23rd at 9 o'clock. And then
And
our next
goals.
I'm sorry?
Is that goals 6 and 7 then, or what's the?
Goal 6, 8, and 13.
Oh, 6. Okay. Okay.
And then at our December Planning Commission meeting on December 14th, we'll be doing that final review of goals 6, 8, and 13. And then as we discussed during our meeting today, the December joint meeting with the Countywide Advisory Committee is December 28th. And we'll be reviewing goal 5 again, and then goal 7, which is natural hazards, and goal 9, which is economic development. And then tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock, consultants from Parametrics, who are the lead on our tsunami evacuation facilities improvement plan, they will be giving an update presentation to the board at 5 o'clock. And on December 10th, December 1st, which is a daytime workshop at 10 o'clock, the board will be reviewing the first draft of Goal 10, which is housing. And they'll also be taking an initial review of applications for the 2 vacant seats on the Planning Commission.
I'm realizing now, Director Henriksen, that it is, we should probably note that we have an additional opening on the Planning Commission in this meeting. I think this is the first time we've met. Do you want to report on that action?
Yeah, so at the October 27th, I believe it was the 27th Board of Commissioners meeting, the board did vote to terminate the appointment of Robert Strickland. As you may have noticed, he is not present today and his name was not called on the roll. So he was removed, or his appointment was terminated by the board on October 27th. We have been doing advertisements for new planning commissioners. As you may recall, Myrna Patrick also resigned in February of this year. The call for applicants is open until November 15th, and there is information on the county's website regarding that. And then we'll be taking any new applications that we receive, any that are still on file and active, and we will bring those to the board for a work session on December 1st at 10 a.m.
Apologies, Director Henriksen. I'm realizing I skipped your report, which is this may have been part of your.
Yeah, but that's okay. I think I've worked everything in, so thank you.
Is that all you need for that section?
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, yeah, so thanks. So those of you who are in the audience or planning commissioners, I hope that you will help spread the word about those 2 openings on the Planning Commission. You know best about the work that we do and why that it's important, and the logistics. So it's good to get out there and identify some some diverse and interesting and interested people to join us as volunteers. I'll just say, just from a county standpoint, that it's important to note that the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine is now available to children ages 5 to 11. And there are clinics starting up around the county now for that. And I myself, and a parent of a 5-year-old, are getting my son vaccinated on Wednesday. And I'm hoping that with this opportunity, we can get past this global pandemic more quickly, but continue to be safe. Any other comments or questions for good of the order before we close the meeting?
Yeah, I have one quick thing. Perhaps this is to Director Hendrickson. When we had the training a few months ago, the trainer recommended we, the commissioners, provided official county emails when we're doing the official county businesses. I'm wondering if that is feasible for us, or is that possibly?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, Commissioner Kwong, and I think that I know I've been thinking about it as well. So we'll reach out to IT and see if we can do that for the Planning Commission as well.
I appreciate that. Thanks for bringing that up, Commissioner Kwong. Other questions or comments before we close out the meeting? Thank you, everyone, for your time and your patience. This was a little bit of a longer one. Go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thanks so much.